All right, guys, so today we have skull crushers versus cables, as if it was a death match. I'm going to disarm this right away from the beginning, hopefully, that again, it's not really a versus. It's not even one definitively better than the other. Not even for an individual is it really definitive better than the other. I just want to create some context around this, have some considerations with both, and then let you just kind of make your own decision. So again, before I start, skull crushers are a great exercise. So for a lot of things that I look at that make a good exercise, the bracing is great, meaning you don't have a whole lot to manage aside from your triceps are working. The profile is actually great. They load your triceps where they're the strongest. They actually get a little bit lighter, less torque where you're weaker. The only time there's issues is with alignment. And it should make sense that obviously everyone's structures and bodies aren't exactly the same. So again, holding a straight bar, gravity only works in one plane. The way that's going to affect your body and joints is going to be slightly different. The other thing I'm going to explain, I'm going to get into a minute, just a little basic elbow anatomy so we can kind of understand some considerations, or basically some, what's the word I'm looking for? Basically some things we're just basically guessing, kind of educated guesses of what really happens at joints and what really happens over a long period of time. You know, how are these joints supposed to receive force? And again, what does that look like for a normal person? What does that look like for a bodybuilder? So again, a lot of this is through the filter of, does this really matter for a normal person, even giving the structure considerations that I'm about to go into? Probably not a whole lot. Does this matter if you're a bodybuilder or if you're someone that trains like a bodybuilder, where you're going to be at this potentially for decades with relatively high intensity, relatively high volume? Then yes, it's probably more of a concern. So realize that all this is basically on scales. You kind of think about where you fall on that scale and make the best decisions based on yourself. And then even at the end, I'll kind of go through where there's some differences even with people's joints that would kind of make them outliers for this as well too. So the whole notion, kind of the assumption, I think that was the word I was looking for earlier, the assumption that we're making here is that because the elbow is kind of a hinge joint, there's a way that it really should have force applied through it, especially when it's a lot, again, for that bodybuilding amount, that bodybuilding intensity, that bodybuilding volume. And so the reality is the elbow is kind of a hinge joint. So basically you have two bones coming from your lower arm, meeting the upper arm, so the humerus, and you have the radius and the ulna. And basically if you're looking from the back of the elbow, the way the ulna kind of sits in your humerus is kind of like this, you know, so that's really kind of a connected, I almost think like a hinge, like you would even think of like the hinge of a door, so like a mechanical metal hinge. And then basically the radius kind of sits right below it. So there's basically these articulations. So wherever two joints come together, you have articulations, you're going to have cartilage in there that basically helps them kind of run and move smoothly together as you go through elbow flexion and extension. Now the assumption is these move well like this, and they move well with a force applied directly perpendicular through this joint. So again, if this helps, again, I'm not really sticking that right finger on there. So basically it's kind of like this and one more bone. The radius kind of goes right under there like that. But basically there's a way that this joint should kind of move like this and have force applied through it like this. So again, even imagine if you had like a door. So imagine taking this hinge on the side. You know, if you're going to open and close a door, if you push right perpendicular to those hinges, they're going to hold up pretty well together. But if any of you have 2-year-olds or 3-year-olds that hang on shit, imagine them hanging on that door and then pushing it open and close, constantly climbing on the door. Eventually, those hinges potentially come loose. And so what you can make the argument is with our elbow joint, if you're applying force not perpendicular through that and then having motion, that's really the key. It's really not perpendicular load combined with load, and then the amount, so it has to be a pretty significant load, and combined with motion, so that's a lot of volume and reps. Over time, arguably those cartilages are going to have wear patterns that might not be great, might not be ideal. And so this is the assumption with these, is that that's how hinge joints should work. That's how they should have force applied to them. And again, especially magnified over what bodybuilders do when they train, is that if you don't have that happening for a long period of time, eventually you might have some issues. Again, it could be cartilage issues, could potentially even be other stuff issues. So we're going to take a look here at my sweet drawings. Again, I took out another loan and I had Disney and Lucasfilms and Pixar help me make these drawings. So again, enjoy these because they cost me a pretty penny. But so what we're going to have here is, hopefully if this makes sense, we're looking at the above. So like above from someone's, this is the top of someone's head, someone lying on a bench doing a skull crusher. And so these are two different people with two different structures doing skull crushers. So hopefully this makes sense. So this is the person here. This is their shoulders looking from above, top of the head. This is basically their upper arm, and where I have the dots hopefully basically show their lower arm. So really, again, these would kind of be overlapped, but that's obviously kind of tough to show in a drawing. So for someone that basically can keep their upper arm perfectly perpendicular to the ground, imagine the line of force of this barbell. It only goes in one plane, it only goes straight up and down. So again, if I take this out, imagine this hinge joint in here. Again, if we took this out just so we could see it better, kind of runs in that direction. So again, obviously the joint's not actually that big, but if we imagine a hinge there and we take the line of force from this barbell going straight down, right through the hand basically is where that line of force is going to be applied to the body. You can hopefully see how that line of force, one, runs directly through the elbow, but two, it's also perfectly perpendicular. So if I was going to draw perpendicular, let's do these little, that's what we did in geometry, right? So it runs perfectly perpendicular to that elbow hinge joint. So if you are a person that can get yourself in this position, if you don't know, you can have somebody film you, look from above or whatever it is, but if you can get your upper arm pretty much perfectly perpendicular to the ground, odds are this exercise fits great. Skull crushers are going to be kind of a great movement for you. Should definitely be your meat and potatoes, bread and butter. Run them into the ground. But a lot of people, when they do them, sometimes it depends on people just with bigger structures, so wider shoulders. And sometimes it also, and these kind of can go hand in hand, people with bad shoulder mobility, people that can't externally rotate as well, people that can't basically adduct as well, which is a combination of the two. And so if you're lying at the bottom of your skull crushers, one, the issue can be trying to do a very narrow grip can kind of force this. But even if without a narrow grip, if your upper arms basically flare out, that's essentially what I'm attempting to draw here. So same person, bird's eye view, upper arm sticks way out. And as a result, even if you have the hands at shoulder width, which is kind of demonstrated here, they're going to be kind of inside there. And you can see your upper arm here. So one, where is the elbow hinge joint? This is all tilted. So again, the same joint tilted at whatever 30 degrees out, let's call it. Now that hinge joint is tilted at 30 degrees. So hopefully that makes sense. That's if we're expanding out that hinge joint of the elbow. There's where it's at. And again, if we apply the line of force basically through that hand, where it's going through there. The thing is, if we take this line of force, so one, the fact that it's off, we're getting a little bit of a torsion-y thing going on, but if you put that line of force, basically how it's going to impact through that elbow joint, it doesn't line up, right? So this is basically the equivalent of your 3-year-old kid hanging on the door while you're opening and closing it. What's happening at your elbow? So the short story of all that is, if you're this person with your arms flared out, arguably with that force applied to that hinge joint over time, maybe you're not going to have as good of things happening with your cartilage, potentially have some other stuff with tendons, and even maybe not getting to your muscle as well either. So that's some basic considerations if you're deciding to choose a skull crusher. Now realize this is a spectrum here. So again, not everybody's all the way here, not everybody's all the way here, maybe you're in the middle. And then again, really it's tough to say, should someone do this or should someone not do this? Well, it really depends. Again, how much are you going to do it? How important are your elbows to you? How long do you want to be able to train your triceps pain-free? And then something too, this is honestly a very real consideration as a trainer, as coach, how much do you like these? So again, if skull crushers are your favorite movement and you're aware that potentially it might cause some issues, then maybe have at it if it's fun and you like to do it. It's not good to take away something you like doing in the gym because that's not great for adherence. So those are some things just to consider with that. And so one thing that I'm going to show is basically this is where the verse cables come in. But what do we have as the options from a cable? So again, imagine if I have someone standing from above and you have basically a seated cable extension. So the exact same motion for the person that can't get here. Well, the beauty of cables is you can kind of move the direction of the cables any way you want. So if I take the cable and I make it red and I set it up from behind me, it's very easy to have a cable lining up with me in this exact same position. So again, and I'll show you, obviously we'll have some videos kind of cut in with this, so hopefully this makes sense. But because cables can move, I mean, I could set a cable anywhere along here. So even if your elbows are really flared or they're really in, you basically adjust the position of the cable and you can have everything line up. So hopefully that makes sense. So again, going from having a free weight stuck using gravity, you can basically set up again. You can see that we've now created that 90-degree angle. Arguably, we're putting force through that joint the way that it's designed to take a lot of force going through, and hopefully that will save your elbows along the way. And in this example, I'm just using the seated variation. You guys have probably seen me at times doing the standing variation. Same concept, getting that cable lined up through that joint, lined up through that elbow, and perpendicular through that hinge joint, and arguably is going to be a lot healthier and a lot safer on the elbow joints, again, especially over a long period of time. And so the two considerations, or more considerations, I've said considerations like 27 times. So consideration number 27 is really here is one, who is it for? Again, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, in and out of the gym, training triceps every once in a while, probably doesn't matter at all. The other consideration too is not everyone's joints are the same. You've probably heard people talk about small and big joints, and it's a very true thing where, for the bodybuilding world, small joints are good. For the powerlifting world, big joints are good. And really the way that, again, if you're taking a given amount of force and distributing over smaller or larger articulations, it may or may not have the same effect. And so I say all that because some people just are gifted with bulletproof joints, bulletproof elbows, bulletproof shoulders, bulletproof knees, whatever it is. And sometimes they're people with bigger joints. So there will be some people that can do this all day long for their entire career and never feel a single thing in their elbow. Now the problem is people look at that and say, well, look, he had no problems, that's a good exercise. Well, it means it was a good exercise for them. Doesn't mean you have the exact same joints and the exact same articulations. So again, that's the consideration there as well too, is not everyone's built the same. And then also too, I would take this and just, again, make the best decisions considering where you'll be in the future. Because I will say, this is me when I started. So again, because I had a smaller structure before I put tissue on, I could easily get in this position. And what happened to me will probably happen to a lot of people. Over time, I progressed to where my elbows, regardless of how much I tried to keep them in, would flare out more and more and more. And I used to have people tell me, hey, just be careful because eventually you're gonna start to have elbow issues. And my elbows felt perfect. I mean, they literally felt like a 10 out of 10. And I probably did these for 10, 12 years before I even had the first symptom of, ooh, what's that? And then what happened is, because I felt I had to do these and I kept doing them and I liked doing them, I had this period of time, or 3 or 4 years, where they basically kept growing and growing and growing to more and more and more pain, to the point where I was basically forced to switch to some better options. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you guys took away that it's not really about what exercise is good or bad, because that doesn't exist when we have individuals involved with so much different stuff going on. But hopefully this helps you see just a little bit what happens different from someone doing a skull crusher from here to here and everything in between. And then hopefully, depending on how you're training, how frequently training, how hard you're training, how long you've been training, you can make some good decisions yourself as far as what may or may not be better option, skull crusher, cable, whatever. As always, this is helpful. Give me some feedback below, give me some comments, give me some thumbs up, give me some subscribes if you're not subscribed. I see you watching, not subscribed. Don't make me come to your house and subscribe for you. So until the next one, guys,